welcome to Trek Zone Live for another Saturday. Matt Miller with you, doing the live streaming thing, producing this uncut edition of Talkin Science. Nice and live. It's a little bit dark outside, but don't worry, that'll get lighter through the day. For now, though, the Meerkat telescope unlocks the secret of boomerang-shaped galaxies. The core stage of China's Long March 5B, which was launched last week, has plummeted back to Earth, narrowly missing New York City. And NASA sets the ground rules for working on the Artemis missions. It's Saturday, May 23, 2020. Thanks for joining me on this live edition of Talkin Science Uncut. Let's talk that science.
Across Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts and YouTube, this is Talking Science with Dr. Brad Tucker and Matt Miller.
And a very happy Tuesday to you, Dr. Brad Tucker.
How's it going?
Really good, my friend, really good. How are you down there in the nation's capital?
Chugging through some fresh temperatures, let's say.
I love it. We've set up a new recording time. I was just talking to you off air about this one. We're a little bit earlier on the Tuesday now, and as we get into winter, we're all sort of rugged up, and I think you can tell that in our voices now. We're nice and snug and deep voiced and keeping warm.
Look, you know, it's it requires the body to enjoy the world in a unique way compared to the summer we had. Let's say that.
Well, given the summer that we had here in Australia, I'm looking forward to whatever winter can throw at us. We don't tend to have too many winter calamities.
No, look, that is the benefit here. Winter disasters are just not something we generally have.
Although we've said it now, so
yeah, look, we're screwed.
You can, of course, find Dr. Brad on social media, Facebook, Dr. Brad Tucker, and Twitter at BTucker22. He does the sciencey thing over there on the socials and here on Talkin Science as well. So get to know him on social media, follow him, like the page. And do the same with Trek Zone as well. Search for Trek Zone wherever you are. Brad, let's dive into the headlines.
Talking Science Headlines.
And the first one up is Space Force. The X-37B has had a successful launch.
Yeah, so the X-37B is this robotic space shuttle that was in command of the Air Force, but now Space Force exists and it's been transferred to Space Force. It had its sixth launch with a number of experiments, some kind of hinted at, most not hinted at. But you know, it's a reminder of what Space Force was designed to do, is to gather that capability, and that they are still going, even though they seemingly may not be moving in this current world.
And the two astronauts have entered routine quarantine for the historic Crew Dragon launch next Thursday.
That's right. They have a natural kind of couple-week quarantine period, so they've started it late last week, ahead of their 2-week window for a launch on the 28th U.S. time. So it's it's all happening.
It is going to be very cool, and we will be live for that launch next Thursday. And if schedules permit, Brad, I'm hoping that you'll join me in the live stream as well to watch this historic launch, the first time in 9 years that American astronauts have launched from American soil.
And look, NASA's putting a lot of work into making it virtual and people participating, because normally this would be huge, fanfare and people going out to see it live, and that's not possible in the current climate. So they want to make sure that that same kind of buzz and energy is not just lost in a virtual world.
Well, we're currently rewatching the entire Stargate franchise here in the Trek Zone family, which makes me wonder about that X-37B. Is it former Goa'uld Death Glider technology merged in with some good old-fashioned US engineering? I guess we as the general public will never know. And of course, those astronauts heading into quarantine, gearing up for next week's Demo 2 launch of the SpaceX Crew Dragon. We're going to be live next Thursday with that one from about 6:30 Australian Eastern Standard Time. History in the making as US astronauts return to launching from US soil, which is very exciting. Well, Trek Zone is in need of a fresh coat of paint, and I'm hoping you might be able to help me. I've opened up our PayPal links, link in the description below and also on screen now. That's paypal.me/spiralmedia. Looking to raise some money to help me get that one done. I'll get it done eventually, as I always do with Trek Zone. But if anyone out there is willing to support the website and me, that'd be greatly appreciated. Of course, you can find us all across social media as well. Podcasting when you're on the go as well. Just search for Trek Zone wherever you want to find us, and I'm sure you will find us. If not, drop me a line on the contact form on the website, and I'll see what I can do about that. But for now, let's move into our stories of the week. And first up, astronomers have discovered the secrets behind a boomerang-shaped galaxy. Dr. Brad Tucker and I are discussing this Talkin Science story of the week. Alrighty, Brad, let's dive into the stories of the week. And the first one up, I love the title that I've given today's show. It's The Black Hole's Fault. It turns out a black hole is responsible for some pretty funky shapes in the night sky.
What is it the black hole's fault? That's what I really wonder. Yeah, this is kind of cool because, the boomerang galaxy, or a galaxy that kind of looked like the boomerang, because there is a boomerang nebula, it's been a source of always is interest. It has a funny shape. There's been a lot of study into how galaxies collide and merge. Well, this one has always just been slightly different. Everyone kind of knew at least, there was a supermassive black hole at the center. The question was it black holes colliding? Was it the black hole doing something funny? Some people thought it might have been like the black hole spitting and like shooting water out like a hose that you've just turned on and let it go, and it's just spraying all around the yard. But using this, as you said, this new sensitive radio telescope in South Africa, they're able to pinpoint it's kind of actually just gas being shot out of the black hole, falling back down and bouncing off. So it really is just kind of normal activity of a black hole, but it's just happening in a fairly unique way.
It is very cool. It's forming an X, and this galaxy is technically known as PKS 2014-55.
That's right. It doesn't always have the illustrious name that it sometimes does, but that aside, it really does have this interesting feature. And so, black holes, as we've talked about, black holes spin as stars and gas are pulled into the black hole. Some of it kind of bounces off and is shot in these big jets. And so usually you have, a jet coming out the North Pole and the South Pole. And this is the case here. But as the gas goes out into space, a bit of the gravity and the pressure swirls it around. So the gas kind of starts to curve and come back down, falls to the black hole, and then kind of bounces off the area. So you get this really interesting shape that genuinely, or at least we haven't so far, seen it in other galaxies, at least at the current activity.
And this galaxy is 800 million light years away. So to see something that distant in some great detail, you're going to need a big telescope. And the way that we're sort of moving with radio astronomy is the square kilometre away. There's one going to be built or being built in Western Australia. But the precursor to it, the Meerkat radio telescope in South Africa, was crucial to this finding.
That's right. The whole point of these new big radio telescopes is, you can't build a big single dish a kilometer by a kilometer, but
well, you could if you tried.
I guess I know we're a little bit short-sighted. I apologize. No, by having so many little dishes, you get very good resolution. So it's not just about boosting the power, but the sensitivity, the resolution, how well you can see detail. And so in order to see something like this, you need to see the structure and the detail up close near the center of the galaxy, far away, and all between. And it's kind of like measuring wind or air, right? It's kind of like tracking the velocity and the flows of the gas, just as we track the flows of wind speeds or current in the water, kind of doing this with now a different big galaxy.
And the big critical point for radio astronomy is radio quiet. So this is where areas like South Africa and remote Western Australia are perfect sites for these big arrays of dishes.
Yeah, they don't like yahoos on their Wi-Fi talking about podcasts and stuff like that, or having your mobile phones. No, and that's the funny part is, you have to go to these just as, big optical telescopes don't like people around. Astronomers, I guess, just don't like people around. There's a theme here, but, you don't like your lights on. A radio antenna or a mobile phone turned on your radio telescope, it's like turning on a huge bright spotlight near a normal telescope. So you want to be far away from all that infrastructure. And then it's not even just the obvious things. It's things like microwaves, things that emit some low frequency radiation, and not radiation in the sense of mutating you, but electromagnetic radiation, light, can really cause interference at a very sensitive level. And I think we've mentioned this before. The one in Western Australia picked up radio signals from LA because they had bounced off the moon and bounce back to Western Australia. I mean, that's how sensitive we're talking about, that even LA is not, it's not far enough.
And LA's too loud.
Yeah, LA's always too loud. That's a different story.
New discoveries are being made every week. Science never sleeps. And this is just testament to the work that can be achieved with such large projects like the Square Kilometre Array. A whole square kilometre of radio telescopes pointing in the one direction. Remarkable discoveries are always going to be found. It's absolutely incredible. Well, I want to remind you of the PayPal link to support Trek Zone in getting a fresh coat of paint. It's paypal.me/Spiralmedia. I will get around to doing this eventually myself as well. A little bit cheaper, but if we can do it fully professional and make it look absolutely 100% schmick, with your support, it'd be absolutely fantastic. You know me, you know where the funds are going to go. It'd be really great if people can support me in doing that one. I'm going to bang on about it for a few more weeks to come. We'll see how we go. Donations are sort of happening. We'll keep that all under wraps. But if you are supporting Trek Zone, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Let's move on. China's Long March 5B is in our stories of the week for the third time, rather. It's the 5B rocket. We're talking about it for the third week in a row. We started with it's coming. Then last week it was about how it launched. Now it's been discovered that the core stage has crashed back to Earth, narrowly missing New York City. Dr. Brad Tucker and I are discussing this one in our second story of the week. Well, Brad, our next story is about the Long March 5B. Now, Hubble was in our stories of the week for 3 weeks in a row. Now, this rocket has been in our stories for 3 weeks as well. It was coming, then it launched, and now it's come back to Earth. It's kind of a bit of symmetry.
Look, there is, and it's we're following the stories as they happen, and I think it's a highlight that things sometimes take long, and there's lots of parts of it. In this case, it's less of what happened on the launch and more what happened after the launch. And it's the mission doesn't stop until it fully stops, and this is the classic example of it.
And I've labelled this one China's Whoopsie. It's a bit of a whoopsie. Basically what's happened is that the core stage of this rocket has fallen back to Earth pretty close to New York City.
Look, yeah, it's so it's not a surprise that the core stage came down. That is part of the plan. As you said, it's how it came down. So normally space debris has a plan that when it re-enters, it's slightly controlled, as in they can kind of pinpoint it to vast areas that are wide open. So the Pacific Ocean is a huge target. So in between New Zealand and Fiji and Tahiti, there's kind of a old graveyard of spacecraft somewhere in the bottom of the ocean. And that's because it's relatively uninhabited. There's very few things you can crash over. You don't like these things passing over land because if they come down a tad too early, they crash on land, and that is not a good thing. And so, it's not surprising that space junk passes technically overhead of cities. This happens all the time. It was that on its way down, in deorbiting, it was passing over the U.S. So it first passed over Hollywood, pretty much spot on, then continued up to Colorado Springs, and then continued over to New York City. And, so had this whole thing just started 15 minutes earlier, the process, you're talking about that it would crash potentially over a very populated area instead of in the ocean. And in fact, where it did end up crashing, kind of on the eastern edge of the Atlantic Ocean, it actually did land parts of it in the Ivory Coast. So it actually did land on land and near a populated, or at least near people.
Like I said, whoopsies.
Look, it was a whoopsie, and it's the sort of thing where, as we talked about last week, China's really trying to grow their space involvement. This come along for the ride. It's not just getting it up there, but it is now the protocols and the policies and the planning of safely deorbiting stuff that is a huge important part of space travel. And this isn't picking on China. The U.S. crashed a space station in Western Australia in 1979. So, it's not without fault. And same with Russia. It is that, you have to learn from it and you have to plan this, especially as you do more launches. That has to be part of the planning.
It was going to be my next point that Skylab did crash in the little town of Balladonia on the Nullarbor Plain, and I had the sticker, the bumper sticker on my car, having driven through there quite a few times in my younger years. So yes, it isn't just China, but this stage of the rocket, the core stage, was about 20 tons, and it's the largest object to fall from low Earth orbit since Salyut 7 in 1991.
Yeah, look, it is no small part, and we do worry not just about the giant 20-ton thing falling from sky, but the rocket fuel, hydrazine, and stuff like that. It is a nasty chemical as well, so you don't want it landing on people and causing harm that way. I always like the Skylab incident because Esperance, kind of like the town mayor, wanted U.S. to pay for the cleanup and trying to get all the pieces because it costs money, and they didn't. And eventually they issued a littering fine to NASA for doing it. And then NASA never paid it. And eventually a radio station in the U.S. did a competition to actually pay the fine for NASA to this little town in Western Australia. So, look, it's these things do genuinely happen.
It's all about tourism.
That's right, exactly.
Well, it just goes to show that you need to plan every aspect of the mission. Now, I guess we'll never sort of know whether this was deliberate or not. I'm going to lean towards it's not deliberate, but a pretty big whoopsie on China's behalf. Hopefully they analyse the data and don't repeat the mistake. Of course, as I always do, in the middle of these live links between our stories of the week, paypal.me/Spiral Media. Please consider donating if you can to Trek Zone for a fresh coat of paint. I'm hoping to do it really schmick and really professionally. It would be absolutely fantastic to have the support of this wonderful community that watches and listens to Trek Zone throughout the week. If we can do that, that'd be fantastic. Otherwise, I'll get around to doing it eventually in the next year or so. And of course, social media, podcasting, doing all those things. Got to keep reminding myself to do that. I am in such a broadcast mindset that this YouTube channel thing, even after 8 years, I keep forgetting to do all those things that all those YouTubers tell you to do. Subscribe, like the video, leave a comment. Please do all of that. It really does boost our analytics and makes YouTube really think about us. You'd think releasing daily videos was enough, but hey, here we are. But I really want to boost that profile of Trek Zone, and you can make that happen. Like, follow, subscribe to Trek Zone across social media. Subscribe, ring the bell here on YouTube, leave a comment, do all that fun stuff. Interact with me. I'm personally looking at all of these comments that you're leaving, and I will reply. So if you want to engage with me, just jump into the comment section below here on YouTube. Alrighty, let's dive into our last story of the week, and it's all about the Artemis missions to the moon. NASA's set out the ground rules for those wishing to work on the project, and Dr. Brad Tucker and I discussed in this Talkin Science story of the week. Alrighty, Brad, our last story of the week is all about Artemis, and we're going to be talking about this as the missions ramp up over the next couple of years. Hopefully we're going to stick around for 4 more seasons of Talkin Science, because then we can be talking about actually landing on the lunar surface. But right now, the Artemis Accords have been laid out by the US Space Agency, and it's telling everyone how to act and how to behave while they're joining in on these missions.
Yeah, it's kind of laying the legal framework for participating. And there's a lot of interesting elements to this. The US took charge because it is a US-led mission, and I think that's completely fair. And, they're asking everyone, private companies, international countries, like Australia, hey, if you're going to participate, you have to agree to this. And one of the binding principles is that you are signing of the Outer Space Treaty. Now, over 100 countries have signed the Outer Space Treaty, so that's not a big push. They're trying to say these are laws and things that were designed in the 60s that we have all kind of agreed to. If you want to participate, agree to them as well. Where I think it becomes really interesting is there's always a second treaty called the Moon Treaty. And that becomes a bit more of the finicky one in terms of extracting and mining of resources in space. Now, Australia has signed that treaty, the US has not. And the Artemis Accords says we should think along the lines of these treaties, but not exactly. Be good, but we're going to change a few things to make it work for what we need to do in space and the moon. So it's a very delicate and yet political way of paving a way forward of kind of saving face for something the US hasn't done, but also trying to give guidance to something they want to do.
And we talked about this a few weeks ago about the Outer Space Treaty being so old. In fact, it might have even been a couple of months ago, about things that weren't even considered back in the 60s that have now come up, private space companies, space mining. So does this sort of act as an addendum? It's not just necessarily specific on Artemis, but it's an addendum to future space missions.
Yeah, and I think that's what it's trying to do. Because as you said, the Donald Trump passed his executive order 6 weeks ago to say, hey, we're going to allow mining on the moon, because the critical point is not that you can't mine or extract things in space. That is allowed, but no one country, according to the Moon Treaty, has possession of it. So you have to share it equally. Now, scientific missions, everyone agrees, if you do a scientific mission and extract it, that's okay. We understand that. But, things like Artemis are reliant on extracting ice for fuel. So you don't use it. It's not a science mission, but it's also not a full commercial mission. And what these Artemis Accords are trying to say is, let's do some updates and let's look at how we can move forward in a sensible way. And one of the things they suggest is kind of zones and zoning of the moon and where people can mine, similar to what is applied in Antarctica. So they're trying to apply some Antarctic experience, and a lot of people do point to this. Antarctica has worked quite well. What can we take from lessons learned of Antarctica and apply it to the moon? And as you said, the Artemis Accords not just touch on the moon, but they do extend to looking at Mars, which Artemis wants to, and even asteroids.
And transparency is also going to be a big factor as well. According to the Artemis Accords, they're going to be required, people signing up are going to be required to publicly disclose their exploration plans and policies, and as well as making their scientific data available. So it really is trying to push this one world, humanity as a whole, learning from everyone's experiences.
And this is an interesting point. So while some of the resources are kind of sidestepping the Moon Treaty, this is something the Moon Treaty doesn't cover. That is open data and open policies. And that is a big part of current space culture, sharing data. We have citizen science projects. And people outline their plans quite well and trying to say, look, do that so everyone knows what's going on. That was not written into the policies of the 60s and 70s, and that would even be, even thought of as being remotely possible. So, definitely doing different things, which is great. It will be interesting to see how it's receptive, because, the UN, what's called the Canopus, kind of the body trying to govern the laws and treaties of outer space, is trying to tackle with what to happen with space mining for a big way. And this, maybe people reject this outright and say, well, no, you actually need to sign the Moon Treaty. Or maybe people will say this is the way of moving forward, because ultimately there will be two parts, not only what people agree to, but how it's enforced. And how it's enforced is going to be an interesting thing. Will it just be the U.S. blocking people out of participating? Will it be at the UN level? So this is definitely a step, I think, in the right direction. And it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over the next few years, because this is the big part, whether people like it or not, of how we're going to interact in space over the next decade.
Well, watch this space, I think, is the key takeaway from this, to see how everyone interacts. People are signing up, countries are signing up, but watch this space and see how it all works out. And hopefully the US just gets on board and joins in with everyone else.
And look, and I think they will. And I think this is what this honest attempt is let's think about this the right way. So, as you said, we'll see how it goes, and space will evolve.
Well, such a massive undertaking does mean that there's got to be strict rules on how to proceed with that. Everyone's got to be on the same page. It is a massive undertaking for all these private companies and all these international partners to be joining NASA in landing humans back on the moon and beyond. Looking very much forward to that, and hopefully Talkin Science is still around in 2024 and we can do another live stream as humanity lands back on the lunar surface. Just like we're going to be doing a live stream next week when the two astronauts blast off on Demo 2, SpaceX's crewed Dragon mission to the International Space Station. It's Launch America, NASA's calling it. It's the first time NASA astronauts, American astronauts, have launched from American soil since the space shuttle in 2011. So it is a monumental undertaking. It is history-making. It certainly didn't intend to be as long as NASA as it worked out to be. But there we are, 9 years in the making for the Crew Dragon. We are live next Thursday, May 28 at 6:30 a.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time to bring you the latest on that, to bring you expert commentary and the live stream of that rocket launch. So do consider joining us for that one. And of course, before I head out of here, paypal.me/Spiromedia is the link to donate to help build Trek Zone's kitty for a fresh coat of paint on the website. Doing things professionally with what we're trying to do doesn't come cheap. So it'd be really fantastic if you could support that. In this crazy time, I know it's really, really difficult, but if you can, it would be appreciated. The dogs are getting restless, so we should get out of here for another week. Thanks very much for watching Talkin Science. Doing it live, this uncut edition, every Saturday. We'll catch you back on Tuesday for another edition of Talkin Science, and we'll do live again on Thursday with Launch America. I'm Matt Miller. Thanks so much for watching this Trek Zone live stream.